Namaste. Welcome back to Mindful Serenity Yoga, or Waking Up in a Busy World. And we're going to pull another question from the handy dandy chart to see what we have to answer in 10 minutes. And the question is, I'll start the timer before I read it so we know that we're on board for 10 minutes. Who or what is that voice inside the head? Who or what is that voice inside the head? Take a deep breath. I like the way this is phrased as a who or a what, because it is a entity for sure. Whether that entity is a person or something else is left to be considered. Not that this entity is some type of a demon or some type of supernatural being that has somehow possessed you, but in a way it acts like it has. This entity that's inside our head, this voice, is the ego, basically. That part of our self, the little me, the personal self that we identify as. Now this ego is a copulation of many, many different voices from our past and from our ancestors' past, I believe. I believe we genetically consume memories from our ancestors. So we have all this thinking, talking going on inside our head nonstop. In fact, 60,000 thoughts a day, the experts will say. And it sounds like a voice telling us what to do, what not to do, how we should feel, punishing us, reprimanding us, praising us, puffing us up. All different types of voices doing different types of things to feed the ego. Because in a sense, it is how the ego, this entity that we believe we are, was formed. This idea of self is the ego, derived from these voices. For example, you may, as a child, have been told that you'll never learn to swim. Swimming is bad. Swimming is dangerous. Stay away from the water. And you may hear that voice going off in your head anytime you're near a pool or some surface of water, or when your children say they want to go swimming. This may go off in your head, this speech that someone told you long ago that you would never be able to do and how dangerous it was. That's one of the voices. We have a lot of critics in our head, a lot of voices from the past that told us what we could not do and why we couldn't do things and what we should avoid doing or trying to do. We have critics in our head that tell us that we should be ashamed of who we are, or guilty for this or that, or maybe even should punish ourselves a bit for this or that. It comes in the form, these voices in our head come in the forms of one voice, and that's the voice of ourselves, right? So it seems like we're the one telling ourselves all these things about ourselves, but really it's a collection of historical voices from our past and from the past that we don't remember. So the voices in our head, the critics and the praisers, the redeemers, are of the ego. And I like to think of the ego as divided into twins, two twins, opposite sides in the same coin. One side you have shamer ego, who is always bringing you down and telling you all the things that you cannot do and what you've done wrong, and constantly reminding you of the things you've done wrong in your past and what's wrong with you and why you're not enough. Then on the opposite side, you have Redeemer ego. And Redeemer ego is that part of you that's trying to promote you and puff you up so that you can cope on the superficial there, so that you can measure up with all those other entities out there that you are living with or working with or in contact with. So shamer brings us down, is the voice in our head that is constantly bringing us down and telling us we're not enough. And redeemer ego is the other voice in our head that's telling shamer to shut up so that you are puffed up above other people. Shamer tells us we are less than, redeemer tells us we are more than. So we're going from one extreme to the other, and these two little voices, which is a copulation of all the voices, our parents, our teachers, our ministers or reverends, or our friends from the past, or other adults that had influence on us, or caregivers that had influence on us, or possibly, like I say, from the ancestors, the belief system that we inherited from our ancestors. So these voices are a copulation of all this, but they come in two major voices, shamer ego and redeemer ego. And these two voices are constantly competing to get your attention, to get the world's attention. Shamer tells you you're less than. And they're both very comparative voices, right? You're comparing you with everybody out there. So shamer tells you you're less than, redeemer ego tells you you're more than. Shamer tells you you should be ashamed, redeemer tells you you should be proud. And both shame and pride are of the same coin as well, just different extremes. So we're constantly listening to one voice or the other, and we're constantly going back and forth, shaming ourselves and feeling terrible about ourselves. The next minute we're trying to redeem ourselves. So for example, if this person who says, I can't swim, redeemer is going to say something to the effect, okay, maybe you can't swim, but maybe you can do this so much better than those other people that are swimming. So it will puff you up and make you feel like, okay, I may not be able to swim, but I can tell people how to swim, or I can tell people about the dangers of the water, and I can be a great teacher or something about how we should stay away from water. I can be an activist. I can be this, I can be that, and I can puff myself up this way because of shamer. So shamer and redeemer are constantly going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Shamer might say that you're not enough for something that happened in your past. And redeemer's the voice that tells you, well, the future will make it all better. You're going to be this in the future, so then everything will be okay. People will forget about your past, or you'll forget about your past, and you'll be okay. So we're going back and forth basically between one ego with two sides, shamer and redeemer. And those are the two major types of voices in our head, though the voices themselves are a copulation of absolutely everything we've heard and come to believe about ourselves. These voices come to our conscious awareness. But more often than not, they're acting in the subconscious. So we're not even aware they're chattering off in there. We have the feeling and the sensation. You may feel like, oh gosh, this doesn't feel good. And that's your voices that you're not yet hearing because they have not made it to the conscious level of your understanding. They're still in the subconscious, working away as your beliefs do, tearing you apart or trying to build you up erroneously in a way that you think will make this image you have of you, this ego persona you have, something that will be respected by both you and others. Either respected because it is better than, or respected because it's something to be pitied because it was so much less than. So the voices that are in your head are ego, derived of two sides, shamer and ego. And ego is derived from all the voices that have led to the creation of our belief systems that we hold in our subconscious mind. And sometimes we're aware of the voices, sometimes we're not, but they're constantly chittering and chattering away inside our heads, creating what the Buddhists would call the monkey mind. And we want to soothe these. We don't not want to stop these voices. We don't want to shut them up or say they, we don't want to give them power, I guess, by doing that. We just want to simply be aware that they're there. Listen, but don't get attached to what you're saying. Don't believe the voices. Because most of what those voices say, I would hazard at least 80% of what those voices are telling you is not true. It's based on ego's illusion, ego's need for illusion and delusion. So it's not true. So do your best not to listen to those voices that are going off in your head. Know where they come from, yes. And know that for some reason this or that happened in the past and it led to this belief system in you, and this one person said this and it stuck, and this other person said that and it stuck. And that's where your voices are coming from, creating this ego identity within you, which has the two sides, the shamer and the redeemer side. Just be aware of that, but don't listen. And redeeming yourself does not take away your shame, and it doesn't make you feel better. In fact, it takes you to a different level. As soon as you get to a certain level, redemption shamer is going to start chittering again and bring you down. And when you're really, really low, redeemer will try to pull you up. The idea is to stay between shamer and redeemer ego and listen to the self that's within you. The wise self within us all has all the answers and is not disturbed by the chitter-chattering of shamer or redeemer ego. And all those voices that have somehow created beliefs in you, it understands are just that, voices with opinions that have nothing to do with the real you. Well, that's my answer to that question. I hope it helps. Namaste.